Hello and Happy New Year, everyone. It is 2023, and to celebrate, here at the Cardboard Herald, we're going to go over the games that hit the table most in 2022, as is the now traditional review and reflection of the past year, because this is the second time we've done this, and 2 times establishes a pattern, and therefore we can call it traditional. But keep in mind, I'm a reviewer and I play a lot of games. Even though my instinct would be to hit the same games over and over and over again, I am definitely spreading my attention about as many games as I can in order to have content for the channel. But I think it's still interesting to reflect on the games that I did repeatedly come back to, whether or not that I had reviews associated with them for the channel. And yeah, sometimes that's going to be the quick and easy games, but not always, which I think says something in and of itself to have a large and bulky and heavyweight game hit the table repeatedly. So with all that out of the way, let's get started with our top 10, really top 14 games that I played the most of in 2022. Coming in hot with a 7-way tie for 7th place, we have Wingspan, Sprawlopolis, Santorini, the Guild of Merchant Explorers, Dune Imperium, Cartographers, and Agricola. Now, Wingspan is one of those evergreen games in our household. My wife and I both really enjoy it. She would rate it as one of her absolute favorite games. It's something that is accessible and fits into a relatively narrow window now that we have a lot of experience with it and can knock out a game easily in under an hour, but it still has some meat on its hollow bones. Adding to this, it has the appeal of the ornithological theme and the presentation feeling like it's straight out of a scientific book with certain bird facts and a particular resonance between what the bird power is attempting to convey and the real life biological behavior of the bird is really interesting and has not grown stale. And of course, this year we have the release of Wingspan Asia, and I'm counting the 2-player mode of that as plays in traditional Wingspan, even if they are standalone separate games or combinable in the traditional way of playing, which I'll have a review of that incoming on the channel soon. You can probably anticipate that this is going to be on the list for 2023, looking back from the point of view of 2024 as well. Now, Sprawlopolis, I mean, it's a button-shy game. It's so small and compact and you can bring anywhere. It's a game that I bring to conventions and brought on trips to conventions this year. It was part of the travel kit, and it's one that plays fantastically at coffee shops. For it being a relatively late acquisition for me in this year, getting around October, I made sure to get this played again and again as part of a review, but also because I enjoyed it that much. There's something about the incredible ease of entry with the game, the approachability, the accessibility, but that nuanced puzzle. And yeah, having the different goals sometimes be in contention with one another can make it a little uneven in its challenge level, but because you can play a game in about 15-20 minutes, it just makes you want to play it immediately again. Santorini is another one of these really small games where, in truth, 7 sessions of this is probably more like 2 or 3 actual sessions where I made sure to break it out over the course of the year. We just played it in sequence a couple times every time that it broke out. Santorini to me is one of the all-time great abstracts, and it's one that I don't think that I would get rid of my collection unless I were breaking it down to like 10 or fewer games. When I think of anything comparable in that chess or Go or Shobu sort of zone, Santorini is the one that always comes to mind that I want to play. The problem is, there aren't that many abstract gamers in my life who really respond to this type of game, so this is kind of a for me game that I have to force to the table, but I always enjoy it when I do, and usually my opponents do as well. Guild of Merchant Explorers is such a fantastic riff on the traditional roll and write, flip and write sort of game, not having you actually have to write anything. You're using cubes, you're using those Euro abstract pieces to spread yourself amongst the board, and it feels like you're not really diving into anything until about a quarter of the way through the game, at which point the complexity, the really satisfying meat reveals itself in terms of the exploration exploration cards that you acquire, which are your unique powers, which will repeatedly act in each of the following eras. It's a fantastic way of kind of outfitting you with your personal asymmetry in a very simplistic system, and always feeling like there are stakes, like you could reach out a little bit farther, and if the cards just line up right, you could get this perfect combo, but that could also break bad, and you could alternatively do something much more conservative. For as simple as it is, I love the sense of agency that you have in the game. I just wish it weren't a game that could absolutely break into chaos if someone bumps the table. Dune Imperium, what more do I need to say? It's that wonderful mix of worker placement and deck building with a little bit of auction buildy area control at the end of every round that just works together and is better than the sum of its parts. Yes, there was an expansion that came out this year, and I was excited to play that. I mean, Immortality introduces one of my favorite aspects of Dune, the deep Dune lore that I wasn't anticipating, having so many references to these things like chair dogs. I mean, they're talking about axolotl tanks in this expansion, and if you've only read the first book or you've only seen the movies, then you don't even know what you're playing with. But nonetheless, even if an expansion wasn't coming out, I'm still very hot on this game and want to see it hit the table more often. When I'm looking for something in that Lords of Waterdeep-ish level worker placement zone, this is the one that usually is my family's go-to. Cartographers, well, I mean, it's a flip and write. It's easy to get to the table, but it's more meaty than a lot of flip and writes that you have, and it's the one that's the most appealing to me. It has that brilliant, incredible theme, having you make fantasy maps. I mean, that's what I've been doing anyway since I was like 8 years old. After every Redwall book and every Sword of Shannara or whatever book I read, I wanted to just draw my own maps for my own fantasy worlds, and this game empowers me to do that, and still has not lost its charm after many, 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 many plays. A lot of the charm does rely on you putting your own artistic flair into the world, and it's a game that every player could theoretically take the exact same move, and sometimes moves are a little bit obvious, so there's room for Cartographers to evolve a little bit, but I still think that it's my favorite game in the whole role-player pantheon that's come out so far, and it's my favorite Thunderworks game, period. It is just a damn good set, and now we have all of these maps to play. Finally, on the 7-way tie, we have Agricola, and to tell the truth, the games I played of Agricola were predominantly solo plays. Agricola is a game that I don't really think of as a solo game because of the contentious worker placement with other players, but I discovered in the latest revised version of Agricola, you have a campaign mode solo play in there that adds this interesting level of carryover from game to game to game, with you being able to preserve one of your powers from the previous game, which made it so much more interesting and compelling. Yes, I have played it multiplayer a little bit this year, but almost always I made sure that I was advancing on my campaign, which I am still working on and try to get back to when I get, I don't know, free hour and a half to myself to play some dang Agricola. As the campaign goes on, it starts feeling really constraining and really tight, which really ticks the efficiency boxes even more than the traditional experience ever did. Now to a 2-way tie for 6th place, we have Arkham Horror LCG and The King is Dead, which if you had asked me if an area control game was going to hit into my top 10 most played games of this past year, or a combatty area control game, I would have laughed at you, because those are just not the games that I get to the table most often. I like them, I have a lot of them, I really enjoy playing them, but even games like Pax Pamir or Root or Small Samurai Empire, some of my absolute favorite games, they just do not hit the table as often as some of these other Euro games, campaign games, abstract games. But The King is Dead is so beautiful and minimalistic, having only 8 cards, having only 8 rounds as you go through the 8 power struggles, only 8 actions that anyone's playing, and works fantastically as a 2-player game. It's a game that I always want to play and am always eager to have that chicken experience between players. I like it at 2 players, I like it at 3. The 4-player team mode is also pretty interesting, but not my favorite way of playing. And adding the asymmetric loadout of cards where you have the same 5 cards plus 3 unique cards to yourself just takes it to a whole new level. And this is one of those games that I can get people to enjoy even if they don't like those traditional area control or dudes on a map combat games. By detaching you from specific faction alliances, it takes away from that sort of take that feeling that a lot of people want to avoid when they don't like these types of games. It's so Machiavellian, it's so accessible, and it's so minimalistic. I mean, I'm going to play this a ton from here on out. And then Arkham Horror, the card game, I played a lot of Edge of the Earth. I played a lot of the base game all over again. We're in the middle of going through another playthrough of the base 3 scenario campaign. We have some new characters from the individual investigator packs that have come in. The Mail Carrier is a fantastic character, and I'm really enjoying that deck. It's one of these games that continues to deliver, and even though I thought the base scenario and even the expansion scenarios would get a little bit dull playing them over again, both my wife and I have found that we've wanted to play them again just to see them from different points of view, make different choices, see the different characters. It's continuing to give rewards, and it's one of those that we go to when we're not in the middle of driving through some other campaign. Hey everyone, sorry to interrupt the video, but recent events need to be taken into consideration. It's New Year's Eve, and I was editing this video to post tomorrow, which you'll hopefully get to see unless something goes really awry, but I realized that some of the order is a little bit off because I recorded this video maybe a week ago, and since then, I've played one more session of Wingspan, which means that it indeed is part of a 3-way tie with 8 plays, but then a major disruption happened because I also got Undaunted reinforcements, so I was super excited to dive into Undaunted North Africa and played 3 consecutive solo sessions of that. And I'm kind of counting, I'm fudging the numbers a little bit but because I like Undaunted so much. I'm counting North Africa and Normandy together. And yeah, I got 8 plays of it. So Undaunted comes in hot for a surprise twist placement in the tie happening at 8 plays. What a game. What an incredible system in general, which I played a lot of the multiplayer, but reinforcements introduce a solo mode that is honestly one of the best solo modes, certainly one of the best combative or skirmish solo modes that I've ever played. It is ridiculously good. And North Africa, mwah, I can't wait to play Stalingrad. It's on the shelf over there. Anyway, back to the video. And here we are done with ties. Here we get to the accelerated number of plays where it jumps dramatically up from 8 plays to 13 with Spirit Island. And this is 10 with Spirit Island base and 3 with Spirit Island Horizons, the kind of entry-level Target exclusive version of Spirit Island, but I'm combining it all for 13 because that's a full-fledged version of Spirit Island. And that 10 base group had nothing to do with any sort of review content. I just love Spirit Island that much. One of my all-time favorite games. I'm going to make sure that it gets to the table. And even though it's a fantastic solo game, the predominant amount of plays that I have with this are 2-player. As for Horizons, I love the new spirits. I think that in spite of them being more accessible and easier to chew, they still have a lot of thematic and mechanical individuality that makes them cool additions to base Spirit Island that I would want to play even against adversaries or some of the more difficult scenarios that the full-fledged game presents. And that's actually one of my criticisms of Horizons as a pack, in that it only presents vanilla Spirit Island without some sort of adversary, without different blight cards, without these different levers that you can pull. And yeah, you could say, well, you should be able to get the base Spirit Island if you want to move on, grow up from Horizons. But as a standalone product, I would have like to see some more versatility, some more replayability, and not have it rely on just changing up the spirit powers but playing the same old challenge over and over and over again. Nonetheless, Spirit Island, still an absolute banger and still absolutely in my top 3 games. I am going to be playing this. I think for the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years, you're going to see a lot of Spirit Island content on this channel as we go. Here at number 4, we have 14 plays of the so impressive Ark Nova. Probably my favorite game from 2022 so far. There are a couple games that I need to knock off that list before I start doing any sort of end of the year wrap up, which we traditionally do later on in the following year. So expect that maybe February at earliest, more likely to be sometime around March, where I'll reflect on all of the 2022 releases that I managed to get my hands on. Some of them came out late in the year, and I'll talk about all that then. But at least from first blush, looking at it now, Ark Nova just took me by storm. You know that I'm a huge Terraforming Mars guy, and this absolutely delivered on all the best aspects of Terraforming Mars for me and kind of overcame some of the worst tendencies of the game. That is also kind of combined with the fact that I really like Ares Expedition, which just barely did not meet the list, but nonetheless, I really haven't had any drive to play Terraforming Mars in spite of me long saying that it is one of my top 3 favorite games, along with Root and Spirit Island. And so, where does that leave Ark Nova? Well, I did review it this year, so I made sure to get some plays in with this. And I did play it 3 times solo this year, but in spite of this being a bigger game, which typically takes at least 90 minutes, even as experienced players, we made sure to get some business done with Ark Nova. I love the synergies. I love the tension between conservation and popularity. I love the fluidity with the action system when you really get rolling and utilizing them efficiently. It just satisfies so many boxes. I like playing it solo. I love playing it 2-player. My major criticism with the game is that it doesn't really achieve anything better by playing it at anything higher than 2-player. It just becomes a longer game, not necessarily a better game. But as a 2-player game, Ark Nova absolutely took my heart away. Like, it is now Bay, and I love playing it with my Bay. Number 3 is Marvel Champions, because it's Marvel Champions. It's so poppy and quick and easy to play. It's something to sit down and just bang out a couple games with. And this is another one where the predominant amount of plays that I put in were solo, because I love playing single-handed solo with Marvel Champions so much. Though a lot of these plays were using the Spider-Verse campaign, and I played a lot of 2-handed solo just to kind of get a feel for how the 2 Spider-Mans interacted with one another. But this year, I did a lot of campaign playing for Marvel Champions. I did the Red Skull stuff. I did the Guardians of the Galaxy stuff. I'm just at the very end of the Spider-Man stuff, and I got the X-Men stuff sitting on the shelf looking at me from behind the camera. So I got a lot of Marvel Champions to play. I do really like the campaign structure, though I think in 2023 I'm going to be focusing more on just building decks and trying different new things with different characters rather than kind of locking myself in all the time. But, we'll see how it goes. It's still an absolute favorite. I worried about it kind of growing stale when I first reviewed it back in 2017 or so, but it's continuing to deliver. I really love Marvel Champions. Number 2 is another shorter game, shorter than Marvel Champions, but another cooperative game, and that is Regicide, the best game that you already own, even if you haven't purchased anything called Regicide, because it's played with a standard deck of cards. You could get the official Regicide cards, but the standard deck of poker cards that you have sitting at home is going to work perfectly fine, and it's amazing that I got 22 plays of this game in, with me only really learning about Regicide in the last quarter of the year. I made sure to play this again and again and again. It's one of those ones where every time I lose, I just want to play it again until I win. And in spite of that, I still had many sessions of this. I haven't played a lot solo. It is usually just me telling someone, hey, have you heard of Regicide? Let's play this. It's one of those games that's perfect to break out at lunch at the office if you have a coworker who's willing to entertain you playing games, or you have some friends who can come over to the coffee shop and play. And it's also one that's great to wrap up a session. I played it some at PAX Unplugged this year, showing to other people, and I even played it on an airplane. Absolutely over the moon with Regicide, and it's my favorite game to play with a standard deck of cards. Coming in at number 1 is the game that I knew was going to be up here, and yes, it is another relatively short game, or actually just is a short game, coming in usually at 15 to 20 minutes. I have a whopping 31 plays of Kabuto Sumo in this year. And yeah, some of that is review content. We reviewed the expansion as a Kickstarter with the early prototype version, and then we took a look at the expansion after it came out. But this is a game where I was introduced at the very beginning of the year at PlatypusCon 2022 by Michael Dunsmore, who did development work on the game and co-designed the expansion. He's an Alaskan, or part-time Alaskan. He showed the game to me, and I just could not stop playing it. It's a game that is still one of my absolute go-tos to play with my wife, to play with my son. Kids love it. Adults love it. It just has this great feeling of tension and momentum and skill and dexterity, and it's hilarious and thematic and unconventional. It's unlike anything that I've ever played, yet it is so intuitive to sit down and play it. As soon as you see the first turn happen, you're like, I know what this game is all about. But even after playing 30 games, I'm still developing my skills with it. Love Kabuto Sumo. And those are our games that we played in 2022. So many games. And I'm interested, reflecting on it, how many of these were cooperative games. As I grow older, more mature as a gamer, I'm realizing that I'm spending more time with cooperative games because I love the storytelling potential, the interesting collaborative problem-solving potential. Nonetheless, there are a lot of competitive bangers in here. But I want to hear from you. What are the games that you got to the table most in 2022? What are the games that you most want to get to the table in 2023? And have you noticed any interesting trends about your own gaming as you've developed as a gamer? Put it in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, thanks for supporting, thanks for being an awesome community, and here's to a wonderful 2023 in gaming.